Luis from Braveheart.com. Here, welcoming you to a new episode for the podcast and for my YouTube channel, World of Entertainment, where I talk a little bit about music, movies, uh, sharing about all that stuff. Now, for this video or podcast, if you're listening to it, I'm doing like a little merger. And if you follow my podcast and my YouTube channel, you've seen that I've mostly done talk about music and movies. So for this one, I'm going to be talking a little bit both because I'm talking about movie soundtracks. Now, there are films where the music is such an important part of the film. Now, not all the cases, all the soundtracks are going to put necessarily fit into that category, but there are a lot of times where the song uh, provides the emotional uh, part. You can think of say anything, and the song in your eyes when it's with the stereo. Put the wrong song there, and the scene might not work. Just to say an example. So I believe that music and movies sometimes uh, match so perfectly that makes the movie. Uh, Now I'm going to be naming a few because there are a lot of them, but maybe my favorite soundtracks, and I'm excluding musicals because I could say Mamma Mia, I love ABBA, but musicals, the music is differently integrated in the film. They're just part of the dialogue in a way. I'm referring to more of soundtracks where either the music is written for the film, not all of them maybe appear in the film, or they are picked for the film, or they just appear in the film, and I believe just make the film a little bit better. Um, in terms of music scores, I'm gonna do another video maybe of the theme songs or the scores for the films. In this list, I'm only including one or maybe a tie, just because I just love it too much. But that's for another thing. This is more of a content soundtrack with music, artist, uh, all of that. So I'm gonna I'm gonna talk a little bit about the films and the songs, and I'm gonna mention just 10. I'm not gonna be an extensive list. So anyway, I want to start with the movie Dirty Dancing. Now this movie is a classic. I think we all know it. I'm not a huge fan of dancing movies, but this one I admit I saw it so many times on the 80s that I just love it now. Whether it be nostalgia, I don't think it's a bad film at all. It's a typical film of that sort, the high class and the low class, falling in love and all that. Uh, but I love it. And I'm a huge fan of the 60s. So this movie is based on the 60s. So the music in the soundtrack has the feel of the 60s. Not all of them are from the 60s because it does have original songs on it. But the music, like Be My Baby and all of those songs that they dance, I think they were all from that era. So I think I like that. I like that music on the soundtrack. And the original songs are not bad. I actually always have loved Eric Carmen's Hungry Eyes since the first time I heard it, and I still do. I love She's Like the Wind, which is performed by Patrick Swayze. Rest in peace, man. And The Time of My Life is such a classic song that you gotta like it, I think. And Don't Put Baby in a Corner. I think this is a classic movie, Dirty Dancing. I still enjoy it, actually. I might see it today. I don't know. So I wanted to pick that one because I think the music they picked was important. And I think I saw a documentary where the director said we need to get a license to some of these songs because they provide the soundtrack to to what they were going. I mean, to the characters for the characters in the film. And I think they achieved a good soundtrack with a good mix of new songs with the classics. And for that reason, I like the soundtrack. At number nine, now this one at number nine, I'm picking it because I think the movie was nice enough. It's Cameron Crowe. The movie is Singles. I think it's from 1991. maybe 1992. And the soundtrack, I have to pick it because it was on the grunge boom, and you get a soundtrack with Pearl Jam, one of my favorite bands, Chris Cornell's Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, and a lot of other, I think, indie alternative bands. And the music was really important because the movie was based on this on that generation at that time in Seattle. And so the music had to be in fact, they had a character which was in a grunge band. So not all characters were all grunge uh, dressers and all that, but I think the music played an integral part on what he was trying to say with that film. And I love State of Love and Trust, which is by Pearl Jam. I love Wood with Alice in Chain. And there was another one that from Pearl Jam, I think it was Breath, which I think was also um, a very good song. And I haven't seen the movie in a long while, but I do remember. I think it had a nice enough story, had nice enough characters, and Eddie Vedder and Pearl Jam had cameos, which I think they were part of one of the characters' musical band. So singles. It's an old film from the '90s, but I like the soundtrack. And from that era, you got a lot of good soundtracks like Reality Bites and all those, which were taking this kind of music and integrating it into the films. And number eight, the soundtrack that I love is from one of my favorite movies, and it's called The Crow. The Crow is a dark film, not dark in sinister. It's just a dark film because it's a character who goes to have revenge on the night. So you needed dark music or heavy metal music, and they picked. I mean, not all of them are known bands, but I love the songs on it. You get The Cure with the opener Burn, which is when he's putting on the makeup. It's just, I think they picked, I think they did pick the songs well. Nine Inch Nails versions of Dead Souls on the scene where he's running all on the roofs. It just matches so perfectly with the scene, and it's a great track. Other songs you get Big Empty from Stone Temple Pilots. Um, Color Me Once. There were a lot of other, I think, not known bands, or I didn't know them, and to this day I don't know if they have other songs. But it worked. I love the songs that are in the soundtrack. They make the film better. Uh, and Brandon Lee, what can I say? I mean, that's one of my favorite movies. I remember even when I saw it, I went with a friend and my mother on this theater that we had in one of the biggest malls in Puerto Rico. And I remember uh, I was so, I loved it. It was a perfect film. It Can't Rain All the Time. It's a great song. Nice little ballad for the ending. Um, Great soundtrack. I think it's one of the. It's a great soundtrack. At number seven, and this is not in order. I'm just naming the numbers. At number seven, I'm going with Bill and Ted. Now, Bill and Ted, you gotta. I mean, music is just such a big part of who they are because they are a band, or their the main purpose of Bill and Ted is to save the world through music. So in three films, you had to have good music, and the soundtrack for Bogus Journey was great. But I've always seemed to love better the soundtrack for the first film. Two Heads Are Better Than One. You got Extreme. In Time is one of my favorite songs. I love that song. I mean, I just loved it. And it only appears like a minute and a half in the movie, and but I always liked it. And it's a fun soundtrack, just like the film. The film is fun, but you can extend it to Bogus Journey. You got Faith No More, Megadeth. I think they went a little bit bigger on the second soundtrack. You got Kiss with God Gave Rock and Roll to You. So you can say that I'm putting on the Bill and Ted franchise soundtrack. The third one, the soundtrack was not to par. The movie was great. I'm talking about the music. But Bogus Journey and Excellent Adventure, the music in those films is just great. I like it, just like I love the movies. Now, the other one that's on my list is the only one that I'm including on this list that is instrumental. It's a score, and it's the late James Horner, and it's Braveheart. Uh, he scores just like he did for Titanic, used what I was the bagpipe, and I love that instrument. And the way he uses it, I think, adds a lot of emotional to the scenes. I mean, you can take you. I mean, you can see Titanic without the soundtrack, and I don't think people would have had the same effect because it was haunting, beautiful melody, and and the and the bagpipe for me, which just reached the core of me when I was watching the movie. And the same happened with Braveheart. I mean, you get the last scene in the Battle of Bannockburn or whatever it's called when he throws the sword and the bagpipe is just. I think it was a perfect blend for the movie, and I love that score. It's one of the few soundtracks which is a score that I have and I listen to occasionally. Um, Too bad that James Horner passed, um, but his work in those two films, for me, are just the greatest. So moving on, number five, I'm going with the Forrest Gump soundtrack. Again, I love this soundtrack because it covers from the 60s to the 80s. Because this movie, of course, Forrest Gump goes through the 50s, the 60s, and the 80s. I think it stopped in the 80s. The film is amazing, and the music is amazing. I mean, to talk about the Birds, Turn, 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 Elvis Presley, Hound Dog. Of course, they were not written for the film, but they do apply to the specific scenes of what he's going through or people he meets, like John Lennon. Even though John Lennon doesn't have a song in the soundtrack, Against the Wind, Rebel Rouser, Aquarius is also in the soundtrack. Blowing in the Wind by Joan Baez, Fortunate Son by Creedence Clearwater Revival, I Can't Help Myself by the Four Tops, Respect, Sloop John B by the Beach Boys. I mean, this is an amazing soundtrack filled with a lot. Jimi Hendrix Experience, Bob Dylan. This is an amazing soundtrack, and it's an amazing film. And I think that the liner notes on the album just said something that I totally agree. And the music is the soundtrack of our lives. There are times when we remember something just by the music that was playing at that time. And I think this soundtrack represents that in Forrest Gump's life. And it's a great soundtrack. I don't think it's available digitally. I tried, but I have the old compact disc because since it's a compilation, I don't know if they still have the rights or whatever. But it's a great soundtrack. Um, I mean, there are some that are not included on the album, which maybe played on the film. I don't know. But it's a great soundtrack. It's a great soundtrack. Great compilation of tracks, and the music and the movie go together well, and they're both great. So I'm going to continue with the recent one, and it's A Star Is Born. Now this is a little different, but I'm including it because it's not a musical. The characters are musicians, and just like Bill and Ted, for a movie like this to work, I think the music has to be good because you want to believe that this guy is a famous artist, and you need good songs for that. Uh, and the movie had good songs. I think Bradley Cooper, which co-wrote a few and sang a lot of them. I loved um, the songs that he sang. I don't remember the names now, but maybe it's time. That song. Of course, you got Shallow. Uh, I remember Us This Way, which is a good Lady Gaga track. I don't like the soundtrack as a whole, but I do like the ones that appear in the film, the Alibi, the opener. I think it's a good soundtrack, and I think it just fitted well. It made me believe that that guy was famous because the songs were good. At least for me, at least for me, they worked, and I could believe that people would start loving the Ali because the songs she was writing were also good. So in that sense, I think the music was equally as good as the movie. And the number three is a similar situation. And it's the music from Crazy Heart by Jeff Bridges, the film where Jeff Bridges finally won his Oscar. Now, I'm not a country fan per se, but when I see movies that use country songs, I don't know why I just like them. And this soundtrack, I love Falling and Flying. I don't know. Of course, you got the title track, The Weary Kind, which is a beautiful song, and I think they fit so well to the character and how he was feeling. He was, you know, drinking heavily, and I think he was a lost character, and the song reflects that in performance and lyrics. It's just perfect. So I do like that one. I do love it. I do love Crazy Heart. Number two, another soundtrack is Almost Famous. Now Cameron Crowe is a master at uh, at mixing movies and songs. But this one, since it was about music heavily, he went for it, and man, did he went for it. I mean, this is the movie that introduced me to Led Zeppelin. When I heard Tangerine at the end, I love that song. That's the way. Another Led Zeppelin classic is there. There is no scene that I've seen in movies where the song, I mean, there is not a dialogue, just a song. And it's amazingly effective. And it's Elton John's Tiny Dancer, and they're in the bus, and they're not speaking to each other, and the song gets them back together again. I think no words is spoken. Maybe there were a few lines between. I think it was um, Penny Lane and Miller, the kid who was supposed to be Cameron Crowe. Uh, I think they are the only ones that really had a little bit of dialogue in that scene. But you get along the lines, you got Misty Mountain Hop. You get even the originals by Stillwater were good songs. Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatters by Elton John. A lot of good songs. Um, Go All the Way, Eric Carmen. It's a good soundtrack, and the movie is music all the way. And the songs were picked helped the scenes. I think they fit very well. I have to say it. Um, and my favorite soundtrack, and the one I think it's one of the best, is by Bon Jovi, Blaze of Glory. Now, this is the movie is not that I think it's known. It's Young Guns too, which it tells a fictionally or semi-biographical tale of Billy the Kid. Now, it has a great young cast: Amelia Esteves, Kristen Slater, a lot of known actors at the time, Kiefer Sutherland, and Bon Jovi made the soundtrack for the second film. Not all. I mean, not. I think not even one song appears on the movie itself. But when you hear the album, I think John used maybe what he was going through his life and expressed it through Billy's life. And the songs feel like westerns. The lyrics are all about this feeling of being cash or about to die or what am I in my life and all that. I think it's a perfect soundtrack. Blaze of Glory, Miracle, Santa Fe, Blood Money, Bang a Drum. I love the soundtrack, and it's well performed by Bon Jovi. And I think it has a few guys, like Little Richard. I don't know if Jeff Beck plays guitar in a few ones because this one I think it's the first. I think they were taking a break from Bon Jovi or they were broken up after New Jersey when this album came. I love the soundtrack and I love the film. The film is hard to find on video. I haven't found it, but I do remember liking both the movie and the soundtrack. Now, of course, there are a lot of big soundtracks like The Bodyguard, but I like I Will Always Love You, but I'm not a huge fan of the soundtrack as a whole. Of course, Brian Adams, Everything I Do for Robin Hood, You Could Be Mine by Guns N' Roses for Terminator 2. There are a lot of soundtracks, and but these are mine. These are like the ones that I could handpick as liking them as soundtracks, not just a few tracks on it. But I would love to read yours if you want to share yours on this on YouTube channel on the comments. You can go also and comment on. I'm going to put the podcast on Facebook. You can comment there. What movies do you like in terms of music? And now let's just have a little chat about it. So thanks for watching or thanks for listening, and I hope to see you soon and hope that you have a good new year.